This is the most important thing that your church plant has going for it that other churches don't. If sermon clips are great for reaching wide, what's great for reaching deep? That's when you see churches that have these sermon clips that reach hundreds of thousands of people. And so there's all this real estate where your content can be discovered by people that don't follow your church. This is why we say it's the best era ever to do social ministry.
For churches' websites, what's the minimum that they need to have on there?
The most important thing when designing a church website is...
Well, hey there, Church Candy Nation. Oh, wait. No, I'm just playing. Guys, I'm here with the original Brady in the church world, Brady Shearer. Dude, I'm in Canada right now. How are you doing? How are you, man?
Thrilled to be here with you. You did us the honor of coming all the way up here, so we didn't have to travel, and we're happy to host you.
Man, believe me, you do not want to be in Houston right now. From here until like September, it's going to be anywhere from 100 to 120 degrees Fahrenheit. Don't know what that is in Celsius, but it's hot, man.
Yeah, the Celsius, we don't even go that high because in Canada, it would never reach those temperatures. I do plan on being in Dallas in October, so it sounds like I'll just be past the threshold of, inhospitable environments.
See, Dallas in October, Dallas actually gets fall seasons, whereas Houston, we don't really get much of that. So you're going to love it. It's going to be great. Well, today we're jumping in talking about church planters that are either in the pre-launch stage or they're under 5 years old. And you guys all know that Brady is really the expert when it comes to organic social, right? At Church Candy, we do a lot with the paid side of things. And I wanted to just have Brady on the podcast to talk about how can church planters use social media to further their ministry. And Brady, recently you posted a video talking about the social media mountain. I don't even know if I called it the right thing. Can you kind of talk through that concept and how church planters can utilize it?
Yeah, I think it's a really great subject to tackle. I have never done a piece of content on church plant social media specifically, but we get a lot of questions about it. So the social ministry mountain is a diagram, and I'll give it to Brady so he can share it. It is the answer to the question that I've gotten the most in the 15 years that I've helped churches with social, which is how do we quantify our efforts? And how do we know that what we're doing online makes a difference in person? We are in-person organizations as churches. So the social ministry mountain, if you're listening and not watching, is a simple triangular shape, in a mountain shape, and it's broken up into 4 different stages. And the top stage, the summit, is where we want to get to. But to reach the summit of the mountain, you have to climb it in sequence. And the base layer is the most important. It is the prerequisite on social. It's no weeks off. This is the rhythm that is required if you want to build momentum on social and affect life change. And this is true irrespective of your church's season right now. So you could be pre-plant, you could be 3 years, 5 years post-plant. This is going to be true forever. If you're not a church plant, this is also true for you. No weeks off. In terms of specifics, the minimum threshold we like to say is like 2 posts per week. And there's really no upper limit so long as the posts are quality. Now, the question there is going to be, well, what is quality? And quality is subjective by nature. In this sense, we're talking about, does your audience find value in the content? Speaking personally, as someone that's been on social for more than a decade, like I still on Instagram can't really get past 4 posts per week that I would deem as quality. So right now, my no weeks off schedule is either Monday through Thursday or Thursday through Friday, posting every day. And the reason I choose those days is because I reach people that work in church. And people that work in church usually take a Monday off or a Friday off. And the days that they're in the office are almost always Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, plus 1 on either end. That's when I publish. I publish 2 reels and I publish 2 carousels each week. I cannot output more than that right now. But that's okay because, like a church, I'm not an influencer. I do not earn my revenue, nor does your church, by selling impressions and reach to brands. This is why taking secular advice for social can sometimes be problematic, because the best advice there is like publish as much as you can, because the more views and metrics that you can get, the more that you can go to a brand and say, hey, if you buy this many posts, you're going to get this much reach. So no weeks off is the baseline. I've talked a lot. I'll pause here. Do you want me to continue going up the mountain, or do you want to interrogate anything I said?
Yeah. So with no weeks off, maybe a church planter they're not preaching every Sunday just yet. They haven't started yet. And it's one thing for a church plant that's already meeting every Sunday to repurpose the content from their Sunday sermons into their social content. So I want to ask, with no weeks off, what are other ways that you think church planters could utilize social media other than just their Sunday sermons?
But really quick, before we get into that, can I give you one of these hats for free? That's right, I'm actually giving away 500 of these hats. Let me tell you about it. So I have a new book coming out on October 1st, all about church planting and digital marketing. It's called Launch Big, and in order to promote the book, I'm giving away 500 of these hats, as well as a course on digital marketing for church planters. Now, whether you're a church planter, a pastor, or you just want one of these cool hats, if you pre-order the book on Amazon, you can then go to launchbigbook.com to fill out the form, and I will send you one of these hats for free. You just need to fill out the form showing you ordered the book, and I'll get you one of these hats. So go, I'll link to everything below, and now back to the podcast.
So church plants have a couple of things going for them. One specifically that other churches do not, and I'll get to that in a moment. But the nice thing about no weeks off, where 2 is the minimum, is that we're not asking you to post every day. 2 posts per week for the pre-plant phase is excellent. That's outstanding. If you think about social, there are really 2 axes. There's depth and there's width. Posts that typically reach wide are going to be the kind of content that you might pull from a sermon, the type of content that is going to be universally accessible. We talk about the intersection of faith and culture. So you might do a sermon and you're talking about parenting with wisdom pulled from Scripture. And that wisdom is applicable for all people, for all time. So you can take a 30, 60, 90-second segment from that sermon, repurpose it, give it a hook. The number one job of a parent. That content, wisdom from Scripture, is applicable to people that follow Jesus, but it is just as applicable and, more importantly, just as accessible to people that have no faith background whatsoever. That's the type of post that can reach wide. That's when you see churches that have these sermon clips that reach hundreds of thousands of people because people are hearing the wisdom of Scripture, it's meeting them where they are, and it's valuable. You're a church plant. You're in that pre-phase. You're like, well, we don't even have sermons, so what do we do? This is where I would explore the other axis of social. This is the depth axis. If sermon clips are great for reaching wide, what's great for reaching deep? And the simple answer is photographs of church life. This is the missing piece of the puzzle on social for churches if all they're doing is repurposed sermon content. The types of photos that really give you a sense of the essence of your church, the DNA, the heartbeat. What is that? That's the people. That's theologically true. But what we also know about social sciences is that humans connect with humans. And so when you see the photograph of another person or multiple people and they're smiling, it has this effect that you can almost never accomplish with paragraphs worth of text. There have been studies done by Google that have shown that low trust websites had their trustworthiness increased just by putting smiling photos of people on it. So like people go to this website and it's for a thing that they're like, already they have their guard up against. And that guard is broken down just because they see smiling photos of humans. Nothing else can do that. And this is the most important thing that your church plant has going for it that other churches don't. You are in this extremely exciting phase where there is a clear journey that has a beginning point and an end point. This is something that we're seeing more and more on online storytelling right now, whether it be YouTube or social. People that will create series or create entire channels, create entire accounts that are tracking their process of trying to achieve something, trying to complete a goal. A bunch of examples of this would be, oh, we're renovating a house or we're building a house from scratch. Watch us as we build this house from scratch. And you want to follow along with the journey because there's a clear starting point and there's a clear end point. And so you're being brought into the story. That's what church plants have going for them in the pre-phase that no other church has. A photo of just hey, this is the place that we're renting. Just a photo of the exterior of the building. A photo of you doing some of the most innocuous things. It doesn't have to be we signed the lease today. It could be oh, we were looking at pictures of, we were looking at different chairs today. Or we were looking at potential projectors. Or we're evaluating this. Or this is our meeting in the home. And this was what we did. And here were the people. And all of that photography can tell a story. You can be devoid of sermon clips 100%, and I can still say with confidence you can have an outstanding social strategy that can build momentum as people get excited following along the journey, which makes them more likely to check you out in person when launch finally comes.
So do you think church planters should utilize the pastor's personal page or the church's brand page for this?
The easy answer is that humans connect with humans. And so if you are using the pastor's account, you are already starting, let's say at the quarter point of the race, where you'd be starting at the starting line if you have a brand account, a church account. That doesn't mean it's a deal breaker. We like to talk about things, the three N's. It's either necessary, nice to have, or nonsense. And this is kind of a nice to have. Ideally, sure, you would have that personal page. So for my account and for Brady's account, our social presences aren't pro-church tools or church candy. They're our names because people connect with us and we build trust as a real person and we build affinity as a real person. And your church can do the same thing. We also know just algorithmically, humans have a leg up on social. Adam Asari, the head of Instagram, has come out and said, look, different spaces in Instagram actually have different algorithms, and the stories algorithm is heavily focused on who you know as friends and family. Meaning, if you're a brand account, you're just not going to be seen as much in Instagram stories relative to a person's account because you as a brand cannot have a real relationship in the sense of the word that we're describing here. That being said, it's a nice to have. So if you're like, my pastor is not that type of person, or if you're a pastor and you're like, I don't know, that sounds like a lot of work, I would just prefer not to do it, it can be done with the church's account.
Yeah. So what platform do you think churches and church planters should go all in on?
Well, what's interesting is we're starting to see what I call the stratification of social media, where instead of feature differentiation across platforms, we're seeing demographic differentiation. So what that means is instead of like Instagram being like, we're the photo app, and Twitter, now X, being like, we're the live event and news app, and Facebook being like, we're the app that you were on in high school.
Yeah.
And Snapchat being like, we're the 24 hours and disappearing stories app, and TikTok being like, hey, we're vertical video. Every platform now virtually offers all the exact same features and formats and publishing containers. So what's happened is the differentiation that we've begun to see is based on demos. So Facebook became kind of like the boomer app, and Instagram became the millennial app, and TikTok's become the Gen Z app, and YouTube, because of YouTube Shorts being really the only platform that young kids are allowed to go on, because they're not having social accounts, YouTube's almost starting to be like the Gen Alpha app. And we'll see if that holds. Gen Alpha is so young. We're just kind of tracking that at the earliest of stages. So to answer your question, what is the age of your pastor? What is the age of kind of your church right now, the founding families right now? And then where does that map to the social platform? That's probably where you want to start. Now, the resistance would be like, well, we want to be a church that reaches all people. And so really you have to kind of weigh, who are you right now and who do you want to be? And you can then pursue different platforms based on answers to both of those questions. The reality is, this is probably the worst way of saying it. I've heard it said this way. It's the best way of communicating it, but it's cringe. Everyone ready? Your vibe attracts your tribe. Dear God, I already resent saying it. But what's true about that is that when you look at congregations, they very often mirror the leadership. Because if you are in your 30s, having a pastor that's also in their 30s is like, oh, this feels right. Or having a pastor that's a bit older by maybe a decade, but not like 3 decades feels right. Those aren't hard and fast rules, but we do tend to see kind of tribes follow in that way. So if you're a church plant, hey, yeah, we're like in our 30s, Instagram's probably the way to go. If you're also saying, but we really want to reach Gen Z, then okay, have Instagram and then supplement with TikTok. Or if you're saying we really want to reach those that are 10, 20 years older, supplement with Facebook.
Love it. Love it. You talked about no weeks off. What are the other levels of the social ministry mountain?
Great. So stage 1, no weeks off. Stage 2 is what we call viral for me posts. So once you're publishing consistently, the next thing that you want to look for as you graduate from stage 1 to stage 2 on the social ministry mountain are viral for me posts. And a viral for me post is any piece of content you publish that reaches 10x the audience of a typical post of yours. So I had a viral for me post this past week. It was a carousel post, which is interesting because on Instagram, we've really seen Reels be the only post that can reach wide. We talked about width, right? And reaching deep, those two axes. Reels have really been the content format for reaching wide, but carousels we're starting to see more and more. Interesting trend and change that's very timely right now. So this post right now has like 12,000 likes. Typically, I would see like 1,000 to 3,000 likes on a post. So this is like, okay, this is qualified as a viral for me post. And I know that because when I go into the analytics and I look at the ratio between followers reached and non-followers, the followers reached was like 35% of the audience and the non-followers was 65%. So what that means is Instagram found that so many people liked this post that they're like, let's show it to more and more people. Because if you think about your feed, back in the previous era of social, we'd like to break social up into two distinct eras. The previous era of social, we call the social graph era. What you saw on your feed was determined by your social graph, your friends and family. You recognize every single person on your feed. TikTok comes around. They introduce this new era of social. Every platform follows their cues because they're wildly popular. We usher in this new era of social, the discovery era. Now, if you think about the real estate on your feed, half of it is from people that you don't even know or recognize. So that means that if that's true for you, it's true for every phone around you and in the world. And so there's all this real estate where your content can be discovered by people that don't follow your church. This is why we say it's the best era ever to do social ministry. I think we all hate it personally. But for creators, which your church now, that includes you, is great news. So a viral for me post is a post that reaches a lot of new people, 10x the audience of a typical post of yours. To give you some qualifiers, the objective would be 3 to 5% of your posts qualify as viral for me. So they're not common, they're unusual, but it's these posts that actually drive the growth that lead us to the next stage in the social ministry mountain. And what's also great about social, we call this the fallback, is not every post is going to be viral for me. But no effort is wasted on social because it's those other posts, 95 to 97% of the time that you publish, that is serving your existing congregation. They're being reminded of the good news. As the saints are scattered, if you're posting photos, they're reminded, hey, I'm a part of a church family even when we're not together, and Sunday is coming real soon.
Love it, man. I love it. And so what's the final one, the 10x growth, right?
Yeah. So this is the third phase before we get to the summit, and it's the 10%, the 10x growth rate. The 10x growth rate, not to be confused with viral for me, which is also 10x. I never realized how confusing.
Also not to be confused with Grant Cardone.
Oh, does he have something similar?
He is like known for 10x.
Oh, okay. Pardon me, Grant. He like real estate, yeah?
Yeah, real estate business, known as, a lot of people might say he's like a charlatan, fake guru.
Well, I hope that you do not lump me in with charlatan. So the 10x growth rate is defined as 4% monthly growth on social, which is pretty modest on its own. 4% growth in new followers. But when you compound it over the months and the years, and that's why no weeks off is so important, it adds up to be something quite dramatic. It becomes 10x growth in your account audience over 5 years. So 500 followers today becomes 5,000 in 5 years. And this is the kind of thing that in the previous era of social, unless you had a really famous pastor or you were spending a ton of money on ads, it just would have been unimaginable. But this is now realistic for every single church, so long as you're publishing good content and you're showing up and having no weeks off. So the 10x growth rate, to again, just set some expectations, this is typically a 12 to 24 month timeline before you can achieve that.
Yeah, man, I'm resonating so much with what you're saying because I'm seeing that in my own social account. And a lot of the growth I've seen, it's not because all my posts are going viral. It's because maybe a 10th of them, every 10 or so posts, is a viral for me. And I've even seen my most recent one. It was a carousel.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah. It was a carousel that really blew up. And part of it was to the mini chat, having the comment, say, comment below, and I'll send you a link to the full episode of the podcast is kind of what the call to action was.
It was a podcast one?
Yeah. So I talked about the topic of the podcast in each swipe. And at the last one, I said, hey, we actually filmed a whole podcast on the subject. Comment pod below, and we'll send you a link to the podcast. And
that's so encouraging for churches as well, because I haven't used that CTA yet in a ManyChat follow-up where it's like comment below and we'll send you this DM follow-up. But like if you do a sermon clip, for example, and even if you are in the church plant phase, a lot of times you're doing monthly meetings, right? So you have that sermon clip and then it's, comment below for the full sermon. So now you have people moving from social where it's just a 60-second clip to now they're engaging with the full message. So it's really encouraging to hear that that's worked because I've actually been a bit hesitant for that. We've always done like get this free download because we're like, that's a really valuable thing. Because like I'm not the type of person that actually wants to comment on a post. I'm curious to see how long this mini chat thing lasts because it's like link in bio is easier. Anyway, we're getting into the weeds.
The thing is, I'm probably going to ruin it. I am a marketer. And so, like, me and all my buddies are going to...
all the Bradys.
We're going to run this into the ground. And now it's kind of almost cringe when you hear someone say, yeah, I hit the link in my bio for X, Y, and Z. Give it 6 months, and we're going to be cringing at, hey, comment pod below, and I'll send you the full link to the podcast. Well, I think it works because they're already interested in that topic to swipe through. And it's like, oh, I can learn more about this. And so I think that's one of the reasons why it went viral for me. So you guys do a lot with sermon clips at social sermons. And so I've always gotten this question a lot from my team, but how many clips do you guys think that you can pull from a pastor's sermon?
2. I think that, and we work with about 165 churches each week reviewing their sermons to make social content. And we've done that for, coming up on a year and a half now, because we launched social sermons in January 2023. So do the math. It's a lot of sermons. And, it's not always about length. Some pastors, we find, you can pull more than 2. A lot, you cannot. And so, the broad answer is, start with 2. And for most churches, that's the right answer.
And are there any AI tools that churches can use to make sermon clips?
So this is going to be kind of like your preference. Last summer, I did a real big kind of pilot project with the AI tools. I used some Christian ones and I used some secular ones. And we, again, work with all these churches. So I put in a bunch of different sermons, different pastors, different lengths, different styles of preaching, different theologies. And I was like, okay, we can find the right script, because this is the thing about AI, right? It's all about the prompts. The tools are there. If you can find the right prompts, you can probably output something of quality. And we did all this testing and all this prompting, and I was really disillusioned with the outputs. And I've done calls with the companies that run these tools, and they've been like, have you tried this, try this? And we would make changes and adjustments. And every time I was like, come on, man. And maybe this is just because my standards are too high, and that's why I kind of prefaced my answer to this question, which is it's your kind of preference. But I was like, here's my belief. Every time I get on a call with a church, I tell them, our biggest responsibility is to have someone on our team assigned to your church. And their first job every week is to watch through your sermon in its entirety. And I always say, we don't use any bots or any AI in the review. Because my belief is that the way for us to kind of internalize your church's voice and DNA is to get to know how you preach week over week over week. And I always say, give it 4 to 6 weeks as we kind of learn you and you learn us, and then we'll be kind of off to the races from there. And that's what produces the best content. Because if you think about the hook and the first 3 seconds of your sermon clip, the entire performance of your post comes down to that hook. And that hook is what contextualizes this 30, 60, 90-second clip for someone that didn't see the other 20, 30, or 40 minutes plus. And so the hook is doing so much heavy lifting to basically drop someone in the middle of this sermon and basically make them not feel lost. And if you want to stop the scroll on social, which previous era, current era, this has been this universal rule that has never changed. If you want to stop someone's scroll and earn their attention, the most valuable commodity that your church can possess online and in person, you have to find a way to meet them where they are and convince them, hey, give us your time right now. And so the long answer to that equation is there are plenty of tools. You can search up. They're always changing. And there are some that are church-specific and some that are not. But I found the best results when you internalize the sermon week over week. Everyone that works at our company is full-time, and they love churches, and a lot of them have degrees in theology, and all they do is make social content for churches. And so they have built up this muscle and this skill, whereas these AI tools, what they're also going to do is they're like, here are 37 clips from your 30, and then you got to weed through them all, and you end up doing a ton of the work. It's like, man, if you just made notes when you listened the first time, I love AI tools for that specifically. Perhaps it'll come, right? I'm not convinced just yet.
Yeah, so if AI might not be the answer there, what makes a good social sermon clip for churches?
Right. So again, let's say 90% of it comes down to the hook. So we work a lot on crafting good hooks. And we have this exercise, we call it the 3 C's. And the idea is with each of the C's, you give your hook a score out of 5. So the total possible score you get is 15 out of 15. Our threshold is you need to hit above 10 out of 15 for that hook to be considered viable, to give this sermon clip a chance to reach a wide group of people broadly. So the 3 C's are cliffhanger, common, and care. Cliffhanger is pretty simple. Are you giving away the entire clip with the hook? So for instance, you might have a hook that says, the 2 words every parent needs to say to their kids. Okay, I need to know those 2 words. And what makes a good cliffhanger is its specificity. Yeah. You could have a cliffhanger that's like, how to communicate better as a parent. You're not giving away the answer. Technically that's a cliffhanger, but it's so broad, it's not exactly compelling. The more specific you can get, the more compelling something becomes. So that viral for me hook, as I just think about this now, viral for me post, that carousel that I had the other day, the hook was 3 words you need to stop saying in church. If I had retitled that, what you need to stop saying in church, I guarantee you it wouldn't have gone viral for me. It's just that specificity that is that much more compelling. So cliffhanger, give that a score out of 5. The example, the 2 words you shouldn't say as a parent, or you need to say as a parent. We had retitled that originally, why saying I'm sorry is so important. Well, now I just know what I need to say. I'm sure I can figure out why it's important, but you just gave away like the meat.
There's no reason to stop. And it's like, okay, cool. You told me what it was. I'm going to keep scrolling.
Going. So cliffhanger. The next one is going to be common. Is this a universally accessible subject matter? And this is why it's so amazing what we have as churches. We call it the church advantage. Your senior leader is putting in all this work every single week, creative and spiritual effort to create this sermon. In the secular world, they just call that content. It's so easy to repurpose that for social media. Like all the heavy lifting is done for you. I always like to say like, hey, you're a dentist, you're a lawyer, you're a real estate agent. You got to sign contracts, sell homes, and clean teeth. And then you're like, all right, we need a website. We need to figure out digital media. What are we going to do on social? Like churches are the only organization in the world that has the senior leader in a rhythm of making content every single week. You just got to repurpose it. So wisdom of Scripture. Accessible for all people for all time. But that doesn't mean every piece is going to be interesting to someone at the top. So is this something that is common to all people? An example of a bad hook would be like, how to... I'm so used to writing good hooks. I can't even come up with I'm kidding. There's a specific one that I'm thinking of that we wrote and tested and then realized, okay, this is bad. And it had to do with the phrase worshipful heart. So I don't know if it was how to achieve a worshipful heart. That kind of seems like sloppy phrasing, but like, the secret to, that's what it was, the secret to a worshipful heart. And the reason we use that is because the secret to XYZ is usually good for that cliffhanger C. But worshipful heart is not something that someone outside of the Christian faith would even care about. Heck, outside of the evangelical faith, worshipful heart, that's a very specific sect of Christianity phrasing. So that wouldn't achieve well on that 0 out of 5 common scale. And then the final C is care. This is different from common. Common is this universally accessible? Care is, this might be universally accessible, but do people care about it as the starting point? And the example that I always use as a poor example would be gratitude. So you could have a hook that says the secret to practicing gratitude. So the cliffhanger, great. Common, yeah, practicing gratitude is something that needs to be achieved by all people. And I don't think you'd ever go up to somebody irrespective of faith and be like, hey, is practicing gratitude good or bad? Like, oh, it's good. If you said, is a worshipful heart good or bad, 90% of people would be like, what does that mean? But that's not a high scoring hook on the care scale, because someone's going throughout their day and it's just not top of mind to them. Oh, you know what? I should practice more gratitude. It's a great place to lead someone to in a sermon clip, but it's not a great place to start because it's just not going to be something that they care about. What do people care about? They're thinking about, man, my kids are just acting out and my marriage is it's tough right now and the finances are tighter than they've ever been. And, is this all there is to life? Like, this is what I'm doing? Like, purpose, community, family, relationships, finances, all this stuff, wisdom of Scripture that is going to be something that everyone cares about. So those 3 C's, give it a score out of 15. And as you do the exercise more and more, you get better at it.
Yeah. So what are other ways that churches can repurpose their pastor's sermons?
So we like to do it with carousels as well. So if we're working with a church and all they want is sermon clips, we might look for 2 30 to 90-second segments. If they also want a carousel, we'll push it to 3, and we'll look for a 30 to 90-second portion. And this is where we will use AI. We'll clip that, and then we'll have the AI transcribe that 90 seconds. Yeah, back in the day, I remember we used to transcribe things ourselves. Before we ended up paying rev.com like $1 per minute, and then we'd be like, hey, can you transcribe this sermon? Like, yep, $60. We're like, oh my gosh. And now an AI can do it in a second. Before we used rev.com, and you can ask my team about this because you're here in person, there was this famous project we did in our company where we moved website platforms, and I wanted to take our podcasts and have transcriptions of them for show notes for search engines. And so I was like, guys, we're going to go in and we're going to, there's a lot of us, there was 9 of us. we're going to transcribe 300 episodes by hand.
Oh my gosh.
Anyway, we got about 30 episodes into that, and they were like, look, here, either you get these show notes or we quit. So, your call. I was like, okay, fine, we'll shut this down. And we ended up using this really early AI version of this tool, and it was so bad. Like, you get 50% of the words correct. Now, these AIs are perfect. They almost get things right even with like obscure theological terms. So we'll take a 30 to 90 second segment, we'll transcribe it, and then we'll turn that into a carousel. Now, to be abundantly clear, we're not putting that transcription as the text on the carousel because that would not be compelling whatsoever. But there's good wisdom and there's a good source material there. So we'll rewrite from scratch a carousel. And then what we'll also do is pull a quote. That's timeless. That's been, true for social forever. Grab a quote that in and of itself is compelling and has a complete thought. So quotes, carousels, reels. We go as far as to chop up like 6 to 18 minute portions of a sermon for YouTube videos. This is really inspired by podcasting culture, where you and I might sit down for this, 60-minute conversation, but there also might be like one question that I answer that you're like, oh, I can retitle that in a way that people will really, really resonate with. And YouTube is a search engine. The problem with churches on YouTube is that we use it as an archive. And so most sermon titles end up being like, the series title, Gravedigger, and then like the week.
Week 3.
September 17th, week 3. It's like, okay, that's a gold mine of content right there. And you just sabotaged it with that title and thumbnail. And so we will take a segment. The example I like to use is we had a pastor. They were doing a 3-part sermon, pretty classic. And one of the segments was about Judas and Jesus. So we pulled that one segment and we retitled it How to Handle Betrayal. And then we created this thumbnail, pastor's face, big text, high contrast color scheme, their fonts, their branding, and that became the thumbnail. And now we published that to the YouTube channel as well. Elevation does this, Life Church does this. You can break it up over 2 channels. So Elevation, they have their main channel with the full-length sermons, and then Ferdic's channel is just kind of those like excerpts. Life Church will publish both on the same YouTube channel. If you're live streaming, you can keep the full-length sermons in the live tab on YouTube, and then the videos tab can be those shorter versions. So plenty of different options in terms of distribution. We'll even go as far as then to transcribe those YouTube videos and then take that really long transcription and then write up a blog post. Piper and Desiring God did this way before it was kind of trendy. You can look, and Piper's sermons now are archived in blog post form. There's just like, answers to every question that you might have. And so you can do that with your church as well. At the end of the year, we'll compile those 52 blog posts into a book. It's like coffee table styles. Like the answer to your question is like so many different options. It's just, how far do you want to go with it?
Yeah. So a question I get a lot from pastors, and it's kind of a silly one. Is there a best day or time to post on social?
Look, you know what? One of the secrets to social is reusing the same content. That viral for me post, 3 words you need to stop saying in church. I'd published that before. And I knew it was a winner. So I published it again. And I do this all the time. Basically, every 6 months, I'll go back and be like, all right, the past 6 months, what were the biggest like bangers that were more than 6 months ago? So really like the past 6 months, but with a 6-month break. And I just take like the best 5 and I publish them again. That's a great way to like not have to come up with new content. The reason I say that is because what matters on social is a consistent publishing schedule. I talked about my Monday to Thursday or Thursday to Friday, kind of 4 days in a row while churches are in the office. That's what matters for me. If I publish at 8:26 a.m. or 9:27 a.m., it doesn't matter. But guess what? Every quarter, I publish a new carousel. Best times for churches to publish. And it's one of our best performing posts. Churches love this. They love hashtags. They love anything, and we all do, that feels like, if I just got this one thing right, it would fix my social media issues. Like, if I could just know the right time, that's how I would break through. And the answer is no, that's a red herring. It's not worth chasing. What matters is a consistent publishing schedule. And so what we say to our churches is don't even try to get all of your content out before next Sunday. There's nothing to gain from that. And if anything, you'll sacrifice this ability to have a consistent publishing schedule. So publish your quote on Monday, your first sermon clip on Tuesday, your carousel on Wednesday, your next sermon clip on Thursday, photo dump of a carousel of people on Friday, Saturday, some type of see you tomorrow at church, and then repeat that week after week after week. And 3 to 5% of those posts, hey, we're going to get a viral for me post. The more of those that we stockpile, the sooner we can achieve the 10x growth rate. And then the very top of the social ministry mountain is the summit. We call these crossover events when we can tangibly point to our online efforts translating to in-person. This is visitor cards being returned. Heard about your church on social. Conversations in the lobby with families. Yeah, we were following online before we checked you out. Pastors being recognized in the community. At lunch with their kids at youth, other kids are coming up. Hey, you're that pastor that's on my Instagram feed all the time. Pastor goes to the grocery store. Hey, are you a pastor? My family and I are new. We saw you on TikTok. We're going to be checking your church out. All of these are real life accounts of what have happened with churches that we've begun working with. And you don't need to work with us. You can follow this as well. You know, Brady and I have a very similar approach to content. If you want us to do it for you, hey, that's how we make money as a business. But we're just going to give away everything that we know as knowledge. And if you want to do it yourself, go for it. You know, 95% of the people that follow me will never give me a dime. And that's intentional because you can do this yourself. You know, we're not trying to sell you something. If you want us to do it for you because you don't have the time, great. But you can do this yourself.
We will sell you something, but at the end of the day, like...
It's not a course. It's not the secret. Brady asked what the publishing time was. Here's the thing. If you buy my $99 ebook, I do have the times in there. And that's the secret to social.
Yeah. And then once you buy the ebook, if you sign up for group coaching for $9.97, then we actually unlock the true secrets to church social. So down in the first link in the description.
I also have a mastermind. It's $25,000 a year.
You get to fly out here to Niagara. It's
and that's
awesome.
when you'll get the actual secret.
It's actually a co-led one. We call it the Brady Bunch.
Oh, the Brady Bunch.
Yes.
You know, it's funny. So whenever I go and get like a Starbucks or whatever, and people are like, oh, you know, what's your name? And I'll say Brady, and they'll be like, how do you spell it? I used to just say like the bunch, but then that became a reference that nobody understood. It's frankly amazing that you understand it yourself. And now I say like the quarterback, which just feel free to steal that. I don't know if you have any tips for me.
What's funny, my go-to is Brady, like Tom. I wouldn't even say like the quarterback. I'll just say like Tom, and they'll know what I'm talking about.
It's probably better.
And then I'll say or the bunch, depending on what age you are. That gets a laugh, especially if it's someone older.
Yeah.
It gets a laugh every time.
Yeah. Oh, so we're right there with. Okay, so any other famous Bradys, you're welcome to rise to the ranks, and we'll incorporate you as well.
There you go. So to kind of wrap this up, we talked a lot about social, but there's kind of the other side too with a church's website. For a church plant that's just getting started, what do you think the minimum, like in the tech world, we'd call it your MVP, minimum viable product, whenever it comes to a church's website?
So the most important thing when designing a church website is photos of people. We like to say show, don't tell. Churches tend to obsess over the text that they're going to end up putting on the website, when in reality, what drives first impressions that often stick, is what people feel when they land on your site. And feeling is derived from those photographs. I love to model church websites after fashion websites, which might seem like a weird kind of crossover, but the reason is this. If you look at most fashion brands, their websites are all identical. It's just like white background and like the name of the brand in like black. And it's just a simple black text. And then there are giant photo containers that show off the clothing. And the idea is for you to not really care about the brand name or their font or like their cool colors, unless you're like a really big brand, like Gucci green, like that. Aside from like the outliers and don't model yourself off the outliers. It's like what I say to coffee shops. Like you don't want to model yourself after Starbucks. Yes, they sell coffee, but they're nothing like you. The photo containers are meant to make you feel, oh, that's how I could look in those clothes. And the idea with a big photo container on your church's website is like, okay, this is what it's like to actually be there. So when I say photos, I mean, yeah, grab an exterior shot, fly the drone over the building if you want, like pastor preaching, sure, but the humans interacting in the lobby and people engaging in worship and kids ministry and people hugging and chatting and big smiling faces, like that's the heartbeat of the church. Wow. That's the essence of the church. Theologically, that is the church. That is what you need to put on the site. Everything else you can basically get wrong. And if you have 5 giant photo containers of your church's people and the life of the church on the homepage and as many pages as you can, you're set. Like when we work with churches on their websites, we will pay to send a photographer to them if they don't have photos, to take the photos, because like we've tried it without. And if you don't have these amazing photos, like it doesn't matter what else you do. And what's great is like it's never been easier to take photos. If you're like, yeah, we can't afford for a photographer, it's like, okay, great. Like you can shoot raw photos now on your iPhone. And we've done case studies where back in 2016, when you couldn't even do that, we'd go out to church. Remember when you could blur backgrounds for the first time with an iPhone? We were like, oh, it's a game changer. Like fake bokeh, it's AI again. We would go to a church, we'd just take photos with phones. We'd redo their entire website just to show you like, You can do this and it'll look awesome. It's simple. Don't overcomplicate it.
Yeah, a mistake I see a lot of churches and church photographers make. I've had to coach some of the photographers at our church's team this.
In the mastermind?
Yes, the
Right.
$9.97 a month
Okay,
mastermind.
got it.
It's not a one-time payment. They only take pictures of the stage,
Oh, it's so true.
of the pastor preaching, someone giving announcements, the worship team, and or people during worship having those intimate times. But that's not really conveying the life of the church. And a lot of what you want to communicate through that is the community side of it. And so that's something that I always have to work on our team on, because I think as a photographer, it's way easier to get those worship team shots, to get the pastor preaching shots, than it is to get the candids of people smiling and without it looking posed. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you just need the long lens, and you need to wear black, and you need to hide in the corner of the lobby, and you're shooting on that 200 mil, and no one feels like you're up in their area, and they can be natural, and you can get them. We did a great podcast with this former Life Church photographer, and we had an entire segment dedicated to like photographer etiquette and how you end up getting these shots. And he said, he's like, like I would never give instructions to people. Like the second you give instructions is the moment your shot is ruined, because when you tell people to act natural, they literally can't. It's the old like, okay, don't think of an elephant. Don't think of an elephant. Like once you get that in their mind, it just detracts from that. And so the secret is real simple. You just need a long lens. A long lens allows you to get a close-up shot from far away. And now people don't feel like you're standing over their shoulder. And so long as you have the proper disclaimers and like awareness of photography and releases and permission from people, now you're getting candids that they look great in, they didn't pose for, and is exactly what you want. And that's where maybe iPhone photography does become a little bit more difficult, because, we do have the phones now that have the 3 lenses on them. But there is nothing that really can replace that, telephoto lens on a mirrorless camera, DSLR.
Yeah, nothing's more cringe than not having a long lens and people see you and like you can tell that they are posing and they're trying their best.
That being said, okay, like if you're like, oh no, that now I'm backed into a corner. Here's the thing about photography. I asked that same former Life Church photographer. I was like, okay, how many of the shots that you take are you keeping? And he said like 1 in 5 or 1 in 5 up to 1 in 10. As long as those are keepers, like that's a pretty good ratio. And what that means is like, let's say you're shooting Brady and I at church and we're talking and you want to get a candid shot of us. You got to basically set that shutter speed real fast and just let it rip. Because what's going to happen is you're going to look at like 30 photos of us, and every time I look good, he's going to look silly. And every time he looks good, I'm going to look silly. And then you're going to get that one good one. And then someone's going to look at me like, man, how'd you get that shot? I was like, well, as long as you don't look at the other 29 trash ones that looked awful, yeah, this looks great. Like so much of videography and photography is just getting out there and shooting. And like, you're like, how'd you get that? I don't know, man. I was just like hitting the shutter and like it happened.
Yeah, that was literally me yesterday at Niagara Falls with the family. It's like one picture, my wife and I and our 3-year-old look good, but the newborn is making a weird face. The other one's my 3-year-old, just fingers in his mouth. It's like, dude, what are you doing? So that's advice that I'm going to take. As soon as I leave here, going to take the family back to the falls, say, we're doing this again. So
ask a passerby, just press burst mode.
Yes. Brady, is there any other advice or tips that you want to leave with church planters today?
I just think for social, no weeks off needs to be the 3-word phrase that you repeat over and over and over again. It's the base of the social ministry mountain, because all the other stuff becomes irrelevant if you don't have that. The one constant with churches that do well on social is they're consistently making quality content for their community. No weeks off, no weeks off, no weeks off. And then website, big photo containers, big photo containers, big photo containers. If you just get those 2 things right, you will have achieved more than 95% of churches, because we get distracted. We focus on hashtags. We focus on like the perfect plugins and the exact right copy that perfectly represents our church, but then the photo is like a stock photo. It's like, okay, like you've literally not represented your church at all, because that photo is not even of you. Get those things right. Don't obsess about the other stuff, and you'll be set.
Awesome. Well, for people listening, why don't you tell them about social sermon socials to
Social sermons, you got it.
Social sermons and Nucleus.
Yeah. So Nucleus is our church website platform. Powers more than 3,000 church websites. Nucleus.church. One of the cool projects that we're doing, I briefly alluded to it, is free website makeovers, where we will send a photographer to your church, paid for. You don't have to pay for any of it. And then we will build you a brand new website. You don't have to pay for any of it. We'll do it all for free. And then all you have to do is pay for hosting. Usually websites have two costs. They have the ongoing hosting cost and have the build cost. We want to take care of the build cost and all the annoyance of migrating your site and building the whole thing. We'll do all of it, free website makeover, and then all you have to do is pay for the ongoing hosting. Remove that big project off your list. You can go to nucleus.church. There's a big button. Free makeovers, click on that, and you can apply there. Trying to do 1,000 of them by the end of 2025. Wow. 500 this year. And then social sermons, that's kind of like a lot smaller. We work with about 165 churches there. If you want us to do all the social for you, you can book a discovery call. You're not able to sign up on the site. You can join the waiting list, or if you want to book a call with me directly, then we can chat about your church's needs and how we might be a good fit, or we might not.
Awesome. Sweet. We will link to all of Brady's stuff below, and that's going to do it today.
Thanks, man.